Hello everyone and welcome to WCN World News. I'm Andy Klein. Well, American journalist Amy Goodman recently was on a speaking tour of Japan. She stopped by Sophia University where WCN had a chance to get an exclusive interview. Stay tuned. So can you tell our listeners and viewers what makes Democracy Now! Different from CNN and BBC?
We're not brought to the viewers by corporations. We're independent. When we cover war, we're not brought to you by the weapons manufacturers. When we cover climate change, we're not brought to you by the oil, the gas, the coal, the nuclear companies. We're brought to you by people like you. When we cover healthcare, we're not brought to you by the insurance industry or the big drug companies. We're brought to the viewers and listeners by the viewers and listeners. And that's an absolutely critical difference. To be independent, to be a watchdog for those in power, not to represent the powerful, not to be paid for by the powerful. Now, that isn't to say we don't give voice to everyone, but we're not brought to the audience by the advertisers.
Okay, and what is your opinion of American media right now?
You know, there are hundreds of channels in the United States, but there's only a handful of media owners. Media is heavily concentrated, very commercial, and we need independent media that actually represents the majority point of view. Yeah, I wrote a book with my colleague Dennis Moynihan called The Silenced Majority, and the reason we call it that is because I really do think that those who are concerned about war, about climate change, about the growing disparity between rich and poor, inequality in the United States and around the world are not a fringe minority, not even a silent majority, but the silenced majority, silenced by the corporate media, which is why we have to take it back.
Right now, the Japanese Diet recently passed a bill, an anti-leaker bill, which sentences leakers and news reporters to as much as 10 years in prison. What are your thoughts about that?
I think it's a very serious issue that we're dealing with in the United States as well. And there's a direct link. I mean, the U.S. put pressure on Japan to pass this law. And these laws are passed using the pretext of national security. And national security is important. But when it's used as a pretext to crack down on dissent, it's actually a threat to national security. Because countries are healthier, are more secure when they are transparent. Countries are healthier and more robust democracies when people have access to information. I know that interviewing people here in Japan, they're concerned, for example, about the anti-nuclear groups. The vast majority of people in Japan are opposed to nuclear power. The government is for nuclear power. So how will the state secrets law be used to crack down on anti-nuclear groups? You know, the whole demand for information about radiation and the state of the Fukushima Daiichi plant, they can talk about it in terms of national security. But it is a threat to everyone if people are endangered and they don't know about it. In the United States, the secrecy laws have been used to crack down, as you said, on journalists, on whistleblowers, and we have to open up, not close down, the flow of information.
Recently, last summer, Japan entered the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement, the TPP. How will this affect Japan and specifically the Japanese public?
I think right now the whole issue of the Trans-Pacific Partnership is that we have to debate it in a democratic society. We have to learn what it's all about. They say it's about trade, but something like 5 of the 29 parts of this agreement deal with trade. This is political. This is about consolidating corporate power. The problem is so often the very corporations that benefit are the ones that run the media outlets, and so you don't have this discussion. And it seems too difficult to understand, too technical. But people are very smart in Japan and the United States. They just have to be presented with the information. The way agreements like this get passed is when people don't know. It's when they're fast-tracked. The legislation through the Diet or through the U.S. Congress. And so you don't hear a robust, open discussion. You know, corporations are very powerful. But there is a force more powerful, and it is the people all over the world who are ultimately the ones who, if they have a say, will always, I think, prevail in a more democratic direction, if they know what's going on.
Okay, I'd like to turn to U.S. politics really quick. President Obama has arguably engaged in impeachable offenses, such as airstrikes in Libya without congressional approval, the killings of American citizens without due process, illegal drone wars in Pakistan, Yemen, and elsewhere. Is there any movement in America right now to actually impeach the president?
There is a movement all over the United States to make people aware of U.S. policy. It didn't start with President Obama. He intensified it. He came into office saying he would close Guantanamo, where well over 100 men have been held, many of them for more than 10 years, the vast majority cleared to be released, but they haven't been. And that camp, that prison, has not been closed for years. The drone wars have intensified, but people are trying to expose this and are deeply concerned. And those are the movements that are important. My colleague who started at Democracy Now!, Jeremy Scahill, did a film called Dirty Wars, which was just nominated for an Oscar. What that means is that people all over the country want to see this, want to learn about what's happening, and it's about the secret drone wars and the activities of JSOC, the Joint Special Operations Command, and where it operates around the world, bringing all of this out of the shadows. There is a movement in the United States clearly around war, and there was a huge victory last summer. President Obama wanted to attack Syria, and he thought he would get support. Not only didn't he get support from the people of the United States, but his traditional war allies like Britain. He thought that would be a piece of cake, but the conservative prime minister said, I have to turn to my parliament. And Parliament, for the first time in 140 years in Britain, said no. They would not give authorization to their prime minister for war. So President Obama was going it alone. And he then knew he had to turn to Congress, the body in the United States that represents the American people, or is supposed to. And his own party, the Democrats, were saying, we can't do this. Our districts are overwhelmingly opposed. And so he was forced to back off. Some people put it as the Russian president stepping in and, giving a solution that Syria would turn over its chemical weapons. But President Obama was forced into a corner. And so that offer was taken seriously because people in Britain and the United States said no to war.
That was Democracy Now! News host Amy Goodman talking about Japanese and American media, as well as other political issues. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.